For thousands of Ukrainians living in Australia, those stories and those pictures are heartbreaking. Joining me now is Shadow Government Services Minister Bill Shorten. He joins me live from Sydney this morning. Thanks for your time. There's a lot of Ukrainians that live in your electorate. There was a rally at the weekend. What are Ukrainians in Australia asking us for?
Well, certainly as Labor has said, and I think the Morrison government's indicated, emergency visas for people with family in Australia should be on the table. I spoke to Stefan Romanow. He's the former head of the Australian Ukrainian Association. They're located in my electorate. They've been speaking to their families in Kiev and Mariupol and Odessa and other cities. I think there's shock, there's anxiety, but also I wouldn't underestimate the determination of Ukrainians to resist Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The worst case scenario is materialising, and I think Ukrainian Australians are just worried for the safety of their family.
Well, the Ukrainian air defences are completely overwhelmed. That's the latest report this hour. Peter Dutton was pretty honest about how he sees the situation and says it is hard to see how the Ukrainians can hold off. You mentioned humanitarian visas. There needs to be a balance here, doesn't there? Australia has a role, but if we and the West indeed grants visas to Ukrainians, aren't we just handing over sovereign territory to dictators?
No, the Europeans and the Americans have the most immediate interest here, along with Ukraine and Russia itself. The Americans don't seem to be indicating they want to use hard power or send troops on the ground. But the West is not without tools. It is not without response. The world, whilst this is the most, I think, significant European crisis since the end of World War II, which is shocking, the West is not without tools. The Russian economy is entwined with the rest of the world. We're going to see petrol prices go up in Australia, so it has an effect everywhere. There's an energy crunch going on in the world. There's signs of inflation in the United States. So this war has consequences well beyond the obvious humanitarian impact and the destruction of the international world order, as we've seen. But the West can put financial sanctions with teeth on Russia. For example, one proposal I've seen is that Russia uses the same internet banking messaging app systems as the rest of the world. If the West was to cut Russia off from its the financial system and the ability to transfer money and its oil and gas profits, that would shake up the oligarchs and the Russian leadership. I don't believe all Russian people support this military intervention. So I think that the West just has to be prepared to stand in defence of values of human rights and democracy. And we have to look at all of the options we can, short of military conflict, to put pressure on the Russians to reverse their conduct. I can't help wonder, the initial shock and awe favours Putin, but over the distance, Ukraine's a country of 45 million people. The vast majority don't want to be ruled by Russia. So if the West stands up for its values and sanctions, I think that there's a chance, even though it seems grim at this prospect, there's a chance that Putin may have well overreached. And I don't think the ordinary Russian citizen is excited by the idea of their sons and daughters going to war against their neighbour.
Are you talking about SWIFT payments? Could Australia do that? And would it essentially have the effect of freezing assets and freezing Russian money?
Well, last year, Labor led the debate, but in the Senate, Penny Wong and Labor supported the government to introduce the what's known as the Magnitsky Act. This is named after a Russian lawyer and accountant who got killed by Putin. And what it's about doing is stopping Russian oligarchs and the Russian government from having property in other countries and transmitting money from human rights abuses. So if the West decides that there's a line in the sand, and it's not about conflict and troops on the ground, but says that in the civilised order of nations, one nation can't simply invade another nation, then I think all of the financial actions of the Russian government and the oligarchs, they shouldn't be able to make a profit off the rest of the world whilst invading countries, driving up our energy prices and causing a spike in inflation, which affects ordinary Australians as much as ordinary Europeans and Americans.
Are any of them enjoying Sydney Harbour while their leader goes to war?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, that's again a question for our security agencies and our financial regulators. There's no doubt in my mind that, you know, Australians will be saying it looks dreadful, and the obvious Aussie sympathy for anyone in distress. But this has consequences potentially in energy prices. The American economy is patchy and it's experiencing inflation. And I worry that the repercussions of Putin's action in Ukraine will ripple far beyond the poor cities that we're seeing being bombed now. I mean, it does make me wish that the Liberals had moved faster in Australia to create our own fuel reserves, for example.
Yeah.
A policy Labor now has, and I wish we had more merchant ships, a policy which Labor now has, because we've got to build our own national resilience in these unprecedented changing times.
Bill Shorten, thanks so much for your time.